You need to leave. This lounge is for real clients." Lisa Newman didn't even blink when she said it. Her voice cut through the quiet like a slap across the face. At 10:17 a.m. on a humid Miami morning, inside the marble-lined private client lounge of Summit Wealth Bank, those 8 words fell like a gavel, and they hit Vanessa Clark hard, not because she believed them, but because she had expected them. Before we dive deeper, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been dismissed by someone who didn't know you owned the building they worked in? If this story strikes a chord, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it, because in 10 minutes, everything you think you know about power, bias, and banking is going to shift, right here, in this very lounge. Vanessa Clark, 46 years old, walked into the branch in dark-washed jeans, a pale blue cashmere sweater, and simple black loafers. She didn't look like the CEO of Summit Enterprises, the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that had acquired Summit Wealth Bank just 2 years earlier. That was intentional. This morning was a test. She had no entourage, no handbag with a designer logo, no flashy jewelry. She carried a slim tablet case and wore a quiet confidence. She approached the front desk and requested access to the private lounge to complete a $500,000 withdrawal. The teller directed her to the glass-partitioned room without asking a single question. But the moment she sat down, that calm shattered. Lisa Newman, 43, the branch manager, strode over like she smelled smoke and was searching for the fire. Her blonde bob swayed as she leaned over the mahogany desk. "We'll need proof of where your funds came from," she said. Her tone was flat, but her eyes were cold. Vanessa didn't flinch. She'd seen this before. It was the same look she got at 23, when her account was frozen for unusual activity after depositing her first real estate commission. The same look she saw at 26 when a loan officer called her high risk, even though she'd brought in 30% more collateral than required. And now, 2 decades and $8 billion later, here it was again. Vanessa calmly opened her tablet, queued up a document, and slid it across the table. Before Lisa could glance at it, a voice interrupted. "Don't clog up the line, sweetheart." Edward Pierce, 45, a white investment banker in an expensive gray suit, sneered as he walked past. With one flick of his wrist, he knocked Vanessa's tablet off the desk. It hit the ground with a soft thud but a loud insult. Vanessa stared at him, calm, composed. Edward didn't even look back. Natalie Wells, 29, a private banker, stood at the far corner, arms crossed. "That amount of cash doesn't add up. You could have stolen it." Her words weren't loud, but they carried. 2 clients looked up. One raised an eyebrow. Another whispered to his companion. Vanessa blinked slowly. Then she said, cool and measured, "Run my name." Lisa shook her head. "You're not verified. This isn't a walk-in center." In the back corner, Keith Morris, a 31-year-old tech entrepreneur, began filming with his phone. The red light glowed, casting a quiet spotlight on the room's unraveling dignity. "Don't," Vanessa said firmly, her voice still calm. "We settle this with facts, not footage." A tall black man in a gray suit, Calvin Holt, 40, rose from his chair and walked over to Keith. "Brother," he said softly, "put that down. This is bigger than one clip. It's about how we speak up, not how we go viral." Keith hesitated. Vanessa met his eyes. "Words," she said. "Use your words." The room stilled for a moment. Maya Reed, 28, sat silently to Vanessa's left, hands clutching her purse, lips pressed in fury. She finally whispered, "This is foul." Vanessa turned her head. "Speak up," she said. "Let them hear it." Maya stood. "She's not the problem. You are," she said. Pointing at Lisa and Natalie, Natalie raised a brow, unamused. "Security's on standby," she muttered. Edward, now leaning against a nearby pillar, smirked. "You all really think this woman has $500,000 sitting in an account here?" he said, half laughing. "Pawn shops down the street." He slipped a folded note across the marble floor. It skidded to a stop at Vanessa's foot. Maya bent down, picked it up, and read it out loud. "Go to a pawn shop." A collective gasp followed. One elderly white woman clutched her handbag tighter. A young Latino father with a toddler looked up from his phone. The room was no longer quiet. It was humming. "That's enough," Vanessa said, voice rising but still composed. "You're destroying this institution with every word that comes out of your mouth. Lisa." Lisa smirked, clearly enjoying the power trip. "You're not a client. You're a con artist. Go play rich somewhere else." Vanessa took a breath, pulled out her phone, and dialed. "Carla," she said. "Start Protocol 6. On the other end, Carla Evans, her executive assistant, didn't miss a beat. "It's ready, ma'am." "You're going to regret this," Vanessa said. "Not because I'll scream, not because I'll post a video, but because you just told the wrong woman she doesn't belong in the bank she owns." Lisa scoffed. "Delusions don't scare me." Keith raised his phone again. Calvin stepped forward. "We do this the right way. No videos, no edits. We talk." Edward rolled his eyes. "Security, now!" Lisa nodded at Natalie, who pulled out a landline receiver. "Calling now," she said. "She's a fraud." Vanessa didn't move, didn't flinch. She held her ground with the same stillness that once steadied her when her first property sale nearly collapsed due to a forged title. The same stillness that had guided her through 14 acquisitions and a global recession. But now, it wasn't just her name or assets being challenged. It was her existence in this space, this lounge, this institution. So before we go deeper into this story, I want to ask, if you were told to leave a place you owned, would you? Or would you do what Vanessa did? Sit down, stay silent, and let the storm come to you? Because the storm had already begun. "She's a fraud. Robert, throw her out." Lisa Newman didn't whisper. She barked it loud enough for the entire private client lounge to hear, as if volume could drown out guilt. Assistant Manager Robert Klein, 48, stepped forward reluctantly. His hands were stiff at his sides. "This woman," Lisa continued, her voice rising with every syllable, "is a con artist parading around like she owns the place." Vanessa Clark turned her head slowly. Unblinking, she didn't say a word yet. The marble floors, the frosted glass, the recessed lighting, none of it softened the air now thick with tension. The lounge no longer felt private. It felt like a courtroom. Edward Pierce added fuel, standing tall in his suit, jaw set. She stole that money, and now she's here wasting everyone's time. Why hasn't she been arrested yet? That word, stole, hit like shrapnel. Two clients near the espresso bar looked at each other, whispering. One raised a phone slightly, but thought better of it. Natalie Wells, still leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, narrowed her eyes and said with confidence, "That's stolen cash. No real client makes that kind of request, not dressed like that." Vanessa, still seated, took in the comment. Her outfit, faded jeans, clean but simple loafers, a soft cashmere sweater. Wasn't the armor these people expected from a millionaire? But it was intentional. It was human. It was deliberate. Maya Reed stood up from her chair, voice shaking but clear. "Enough. You're all out of line. You don't even know her." Edward laughed. "Oh, we know the type. She probably got someone's login and thinks she can just walk in here and drain $500,000 like it's her birthday." Robert shifted again, clearly uneasy. His lips parted like he wanted to say something. He didn't. Keith Morris, still holding his phone just low enough to seem subtle, looked to Vanessa. "I should be recording this." Vanessa shook her head. "Words." Not lenses. Calvin Holt stood beside her, stepping closer to Keith. Let your voice work, not your camera. If we want to change the room, we speak in it, not post about it after... Keith hesitated. You're right. But this doesn't feel real. Maya looked around. It is. This is how they treat us. Natalie took a sharp breath. You're making a scene. Vanessa's voice cut through everything like a thread of steel. You called security on me for existing. That's the only scene here. Robert finally spoke, voice low, eyes to the floor. Do you have any account verification? The words stumbled out, like they were dragging shame behind them. Vanessa didn't look at him. She dialed Carla Evans. Carla, they've escalated it. Proceed to Phase 2 of Protocol 6. Carla's voice came through steady, efficient. Confirmed. I've logged the escalation and noted the language used. Also, Lisa's call to security is time-stamped. Internal audit will hear this, Vanessa replied. They'll hear everything, every word. Robert straightened up slightly, caught between two worlds, his loyalty to Lisa, and the truth unraveling around him. Lisa waved him off. Don't entertain this. She's just here to make a mess. Edward chimed in again. She's probably filming some social stunt, trying to play victim for views. Keith stepped forward now, forgetting the camera. She's not filming. I was. But I stopped, because she asked us to speak, not post. Maybe try listening for once. Natalie's voice cracked slightly. Security's coming. Let them deal with this. Maya didn't sit. Security for what? A withdrawal? Lisa raised her voice again. You're all being manipulated. You think someone like her walks in off the street and has access to $500,000? Wake up. Vanessa turned to face her fully now. You sound afraid. That's the sound of your job slipping away. Lisa, Lisa hissed. Threats? That's what you're going with now? Vanessa didn't blink. No, just a mirror. Carla's voice returned over the phone. Vanessa, I've elevated the incident to our corporate ethics board. They're monitoring live. And we've logged every biased phrase spoken within the last 3 minutes. I've also linked the 2023 Summit acquisition documents to your profile file for real-time confirmation. Vanessa nodded once. Keep the line open. Lisa scoffed. Corporate's not going to save your little con job. Robert turned slowly, his voice hollow. Lisa, what if she's right? Lisa stared at him like he'd just betrayed her family. Don't be naive. But the cracks were showing. Vanessa stood up now, steady and calm. You asked for proof of funds. You accused me of fraud. You called me a thief. You triggered a security call. You mocked the way I dressed. And you humiliated me in a room full of witnesses. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. And I'm still standing here. Why do you think that is? The silence in the room was immediate. Even Edward folded his arms tighter, lips pressed. Maya walked to Vanessa's side. What now? Vanessa said. We wait. The truth is coming whether they want it or not. Lisa folded her arms tighter. You're bluffing. You have nothing, Edward barked. If she had money, she'd show it. You people always act entitled until someone asks for numbers. Calvin turned sharply. You people? The words echoed. Robert sat down in one of the lounge chairs. This isn't how we should treat people. Natalie rolled her eyes. It's called protocol. Vanessa spoke to Carla again. Have you started Phase 3? Carla replied. Already underway. Lisa's compliance reports are being pulled. And just for note, 8 of her prior service complaints involved women of color, all filed under unverified and never escalated. It's not a good look. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Absorbing that, she had known, but hearing it laid out so clearly still hit differently. "Thank you. Carla, don't stop." Maya's voice cracked. "They're trying to erase us. With policy, with tone, with fake concern for security." Vanessa placed a hand on her shoulder. "Not today." Lisa smirked. "You think your little phone call and a few tech buzzwords are going to change anything?" Vanessa's gaze sharpened. "No. But I'm not here to change everything. I'm here to end this branch's legacy of silence," Keith murmured. "Damn." Calvin nodded slowly. "And this is why we don't record. Because when people speak the truth like this, it doesn't need a filter." Suddenly, Natalie stepped toward Vanessa and picked up the fallen tablet from earlier. She held it in both hands, looked down at it. Then, without a word, she tossed it to the side, where it skidded across the floor and hit the base of a leather chair. "Stolen junk," she muttered. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "That was yours to destroy? Or just your impulse to control?" Natalie turned her back. Robert watched her walk away and shook his head. "She's gone too far." And in that moment, Vanessa spoke again. "Every second you spend talking instead of reflecting is a second closer to the end of your employment." Lisa's smile faded. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Vanessa's tone sharpened. "No, I'm your reckoning. Call the police. She's a financial threat." Natalie Wells didn't hesitate. She picked up the landline receiver and dialed fast, her voice loud enough for the whole lounge to hear as she said, "Yes, we have a woman here attempting to withdraw funds under false pretenses. High amount. Possibly stolen." She didn't stutter. She sounded practiced, like this wasn't her first time. Vanessa Clark sat motionless in the center of the client lounge, her hands folded over her tablet, eyes locked forward, voice quiet but sharp. "You just made a federal false report. I hope you're ready to explain it in court." Lisa Newman scoffed, arms folded as she leaned beside the espresso machine. "Sweetheart, that's not how this works. We protect the institution, not the imposters." Her words were laced with contempt, not caution. Then she turned to Robert Klein, the assistant manager. "Get her out, now." Robert didn't move. His eyes flicked toward Vanessa, then to Natalie, then back to Lisa. "She hasn't even raised her voice," he muttered. "That's what scares you, isn't it?" Edward Pierce stepped forward, shoving his hands in his pockets, trying to fill the room with his presence. "She's laundering money. That's obvious. What else do you need?" He waved a platinum-colored business card in the air like it meant something. "And I'm supposed to be in the vault consultation. I'm a priority client." His voice was harsh, his tone theatrical. "This woman is nothing. This is all theater." Lisa suddenly stepped behind Vanessa's chair and demanded, "Show me your financial history, right now. If you're legit. Prove it. Open your account in front of everyone." The tone wasn't procedural. It was taunting. Vanessa didn't move. She lifted her head slowly, then looked to the entryway as footsteps echoed in. The security lead, Tyler Moss, 34, had arrived. He wore a Navy uniform with a Summit Wealth badge stitched tight above his heart. "What's going on here?" he asked. Natalie pointed directly at Vanessa. "She's a suspected fraud. We've requested verification. She's refused, and now she's escalating the situation with her phone." Tyler nodded and walked over, then stood directly in front of Vanessa's seat. "I need your bag and your tablet." He didn't ask. He reached. When Vanessa didn't immediately move, Tyler shoved her purse off the adjacent seat and onto the floor. "You're being detained for non-compliance." Calvin Holt, still standing near the center of the room, stepped forward. "That is not legal. She hasn't broken a single law. Maya Reed grabbed her phone but didn't record. She simply gripped it, trembling. "This is what happens," she whispered. "Even when you sit quietly." Vanessa's eyes locked on Tyler's face. "Touch me again, and I will personally make sure Summit Wealth pays for it." Tyler raised an eyebrow, amused. "Lady, I don't care what you threaten. You don't belong here." Those 5 words sliced deeper than anything else. "You don't belong here." Calvin moved to stand between them. "Step back. Man," Tyler held firm. "You interfering now?" "I'm protecting a client," Calvin said, holding his ground. Keith Morris stood from the corner, holding his phone higher now. "This needs to be seen." Vanessa's voice cracked, not from fear, but fury. "Keith, we don't need their eyes, we need their ears." Keith lowered his phone, swallowing hard. "Then say it louder." Vanessa turned to Lisa and spoke slowly. "You demand my history like I owe you my identity. But I don't owe this room anything. I've earned more than anyone in here, including you. So instead of asking where my money came from, maybe ask why you think you have the right to question it." At that moment, Carla Evans's voice came through the phone in Vanessa's hand, steady and deliberate. "Vanessa, Protocol 6 is now fully active. Summit's Compliance Board has flagged Lisa's employee record. They're pulling the 2023 audit logs. I've also linked Edward's prior formal warning for verbal misconduct. One more incident and corporate will suspend his client privileges." Vanessa didn't smile. She just nodded. "Let it all run." Lisa leaned forward, almost growling. "You won't get away with this," Vanessa replied. "You mean being black, wealthy, and patient? I've done it for 20 years. Robert backed away from the cluster forming near Vanessa's seat, mumbling. "This is not what I signed up for." Natalie gripped the phone tighter as she continued speaking with dispatch, giving her name clearly, spelling out possible financial criminal present with no irony. Clients around the lounge began to murmur louder. An elderly man near the window stood and shook his head. "This is ridiculous," he said. A young black couple nearby took each other's hands. Then came the crack, Robert's voice, low but clear. "I need to say something." All eyes turned. "Lisa, Natalie, what we're doing is wrong." Lisa's eyes went wide. "Don't you dare!" Robert looked at the floor. "Natalie wanted the police here. She didn't even run the verification. She refused to check the back end. She said bringing them in would shut her down fast." Natalie gasped. "You liar!" Robert nodded once. "I was there. You said it, and you said it knowing who she might be," Edward shouted. "You're turning on your team for her? She's bluffing." Vanessa stood slowly. "Then call the bluff." She lifted her voice, finally, powerfully. "I am Vanessa Clark, CEO of Summit Enterprises, owner of Summit Wealth Bank, and every second you've spent humiliating me in this room, it's been recorded, logged, and now witnessed." Clients around the lounge stared, frozen. Lisa's face lost its color. Robert didn't move. Natalie backed toward the wall. Tyler blinked like he'd seen a ghost. Then it hit. The twist wasn't the reveal. It was the response. Clients started clapping, slowly, then all at once. Calvin stepped forward. "I knew I'd seen you before. Forbes. 2 years ago. Your company turned this bank around." Maya stood, tears in her eyes. "She's our CEO," Keith whispered. "I should have filmed this part." Vanessa looked around the room, her voice no longer calm, now commanding. "The problem wasn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is how you treated someone you thought didn't matter," Lisa stammered. You set us up?" Vanessa answered. "No, I tested you, and you failed." The entire room shifted, and from the corner of the lounge, the sound of sirens grew faint in the distance. Police were coming. But the real justice. It had already walked through the front door. "Detain her now, before she disappears." Lisa Newman's voice cracked with desperation as she pointed at Vanessa, eyes wild, posture no longer composed but combative. The tension in the private client lounge snapped. Tyler Moss, the security lead, stepped forward without hesitation. Reaching for Vanessa's arm as if dragging her away would undo the last 5 minutes of truth. But Vanessa didn't move. She stood as if anchored to the floor itself. "Touch me, and you'll lose more than your job," she said. Not loud, but firm, steady, and absolute. Maya Reed stepped in between them before Tyler's fingers could close. "Back up," she shouted. "You saw what she just said. She owns this place." Tyler hesitated. He glanced at Lisa, then back at Vanessa, the growing uncertainty in his stance exposing the cracks beneath the uniform. At that moment, the double doors to the lounge pushed open and 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside. Their boots echoed over the polished floor. A hush swept over the room. One officer, a white man in his 40s with a worn expression, raised a brow as his gaze met Vanessa's. "We got a report of a fraud attempt. Can someone tell us what's going on?" Natalie Wells stepped forward immediately, posture squared like she was proud of what she'd done. "She's impersonating a high-net-worth client. She demanded $500,000 in cash with no verification." Her voice was sharp. "This could be a federal-level theft." Vanessa didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She simply turned toward the officer and said, "I'd like to make a statement, but not yet." Before the officer could respond, the sound of a soft, cracking voice broke through the silence. "They're lying." Every head turned. It was Zara Brooks, a 24-year-old black woman in a denim jacket seated quietly near the frosted glass divider. She'd been silent until now, small in posture, unnoticed. "They did it to me, too. 2 weeks ago," she said, standing slowly. "I came in to open a photography business account. Natalie refused to run my EN," she said. "We don't open accounts for freelancers with inconsistent histories." Natalie spun toward her. "That's not true." Zara raised her phone. "I recorded it, didn't post it, but it's time someone did." Gasps echoed through the room. Tyler took a single step back. One of the police officers turned to Natalie and asked, "Ma'am, did you make that call knowing she owns this bank?" Natalie's face lost its color. "She didn't own it at the time," she stammered. Vanessa turned slowly. "I've owned it for nearly 2 years, which means what you just said is either a lie or a confession." Keith Morris lifted his phone again, but this time, he didn't hit record. He just whispered, "She didn't have to shout. She didn't need a camera. She is the camera now." Calvin Holt looked to the officers and said, "Gentlemen, I think you're witnessing the end of a system, one that protected people like Natalie, Lisa, and Edward. And I think you know it too." The officer who had spoken earlier nodded, slowly but noticeably. "We're not making any arrests, but we'll be writing a report, a full one." Carla Evans's voice came through on Vanessa's phone, calm and timely. "Vanessa, corporate has received the Zara Brooks complaint. It was buried. Natalie flagged it as ineligible for review. That violates compliance policy 4.3. Vanessa nodded. "And Lisa's role?" Carla answered. "She signed off on the rejection." Vanessa turned to Lisa, whose defiance was giving way to panic. "You told me to leave. You refused my ID. You called me a con artist. And now you want to hide behind Natalie's bad paperwork?" Lisa's hands trembled. "You dressed like you didn't belong here. I made a judgment call." Vanessa stepped forward. "That wasn't judgment. That was bias." Edward Pierce, still lingering at the edge of the crowd, scoffed. "We're all being dramatic. I'm leaving. I've got better things to do," Maya Reed shouted. "No, you don't. You were part of this," Edward snapped. "You people are always so loud." And just like that, the room boiled over. "You people?" Keith said. "You mean the woman who owns the bank?" Calvin stepped between Edward and the rest. "Leave now. Man, that card you wave around won't protect you from what just happened." Edward turned toward the door, but not before one of the officers said, "Sir, we'll need your statement before you go." He paused, then slowly sat down, defeated. Vanessa turned back to the police. "I'd like to de-escalate this in-house. No arrests. Not yet. I want people to speak. I want the room to understand what just happened here." One officer nodded. "You sure about that?" "Completely," Vanessa said. She turned to Zara. "You're brave. You should never have had to be," Zara replied. "I just wanted to open an account. That's all." Vanessa placed her hand over her heart. "And from today forward, you'll never be treated like that again. In fact, your account will be opened personally by the executive board, fee-free. You've earned that much." Calvin turned to Vanessa, voice warm. "You didn't just stop a system. You exposed it." Vanessa looked at him, her voice low. "And now I'm going to dismantle it." Behind her, Lisa muttered to herself, eyes lost. "This was never supposed to happen." Robert stood beside her, quiet but not defensive. "It was always going to happen. We just didn't think we'd get caught." Tyler took a single step toward the exit. Vanessa raised a hand. "Stay. You'll need to hear what comes next. Because your name's on the file, too," Maya whispered to Keith. "She's not just firing them. She's rewriting the rules." Carla's voice came back through the phone. "Summit compliance officers are arriving within 10 minutes. They've requested Vanessa lead the internal debrief, and they've approved full authority to act." Vanessa smiled faintly. "Good, because I've been ready for this day, longer than they know." And with the lounge watching, clients, staff, officers, and a young woman named Zara, the future of Summit Wealth was no longer a question of policy. It was a matter of personal reckoning. Enough. Vanessa Clark's voice didn't rise, but it silenced the entire room. The client lounge, once humming with tension and scattered disbelief, now stood still. Every client, every officer, every staff member held their breath. She stepped forward, no longer seated, no longer patient. She wore no badge, no visible sign of title or ownership, yet her presence now filled the entire space like the weight of a verdict. "For 10 minutes, I've endured slurs, suspicion, and slander inside a building that bears my company's name. So allow me to remove all doubt." She reached into her tablet case and pulled out a small black folder embossed with the gold Summit Wealth Bank logo. She opened it carefully and turned it toward the nearest officer and then to the room. Inside, a corporate ID, a notarized certificate, and a letter of authority signed by the board of directors. "My name is Vanessa Clark. I am the founder and CEO of Summit Enterprises. I own 81% of Summit Wealth Bank. And starting today, I will no longer tolerate misconduct under this roof." The reaction was instant. Lisa's jaw dropped. Robert took a step backward, face ashen. Natalie staggered into a chair. Tyler's hands fell from his belt. Even Edward Pierce, seated and stewing, leaned forward in stunned silence. Carla's voice crackled through the phone, still connected. "Vanessa has full termination authority as listed under Summit Compliance Directive 4B. This conversation is being logged for HR verification. You may proceed, ma'am." Vanessa didn't smile. She simply turned and faced the staff directly. "Lisa Newman, you're fired, effective immediately, for racial bias, abuse of position, and obstruction of client services. Lisa's mouth opened, but no sound came. Her voice had carried so easily 10 minutes earlier. Now it trembled in retreat. Robert Klein, you're fired, not just for complicity, but for standing silent while a client was profiled, accused, and humiliated. Robert didn't argue. He simply lowered his head. Natalie Wells, Vanessa continued, you're terminated for knowingly fabricating a client risk report, triggering a false police call, and burying bias complaints. You broke the system from the inside. Natalie let out a sharp breath, her composure breaking. I didn't know it was you. Vanessa didn't flinch. And if it had been someone else? Natalie's lips parted. She stopped. There was no defense. Tyler Moss, Vanessa said. Turning. You're dismissed for aggression, unlawful detainment attempt, and failure to de-escalate. Tyler stood tall but didn't respond. He just turned and walked to the far end of the lounge like a man waiting for a bus to take him off a cliff. And Edward Pierce, Vanessa said, voice colder now. You're banned from all Summit-affiliated institutions, effective immediately, for harassment, racism, and documented misconduct. Edward jumped up. You can't ban me. I'm worth more to this bank than half the people in here, Maya shouted from the side. Not today. You're not. Vanessa raised her hand calmly. We don't build institutions to serve the loudest ego. We build them to protect the quiet dignity of the people who walk in expecting fairness. The room erupted in applause. Not the kind that's performative or polite, but the kind that carries years of pent-up injustice in its rhythm. Calvin Holt stood with a quiet nod. That, he said, was justice in real time. Zara Brooks, still standing off to the side, had tears in her eyes. I thought I'd never be seen. Not really. Vanessa looked at her, her voice softening. You weren't just seen today. You were believed, just as the officers began to exit. Natalie suddenly spoke. Her voice cracked, small and raw. Wait. The room quieted again. I need to say something. Vanessa turned, her expression unchanged. Speak. Natalie took a breath so deep it shook her shoulders. I buried 8 complaints in the last year. All of them came from women of color. I flagged them as duplicates, unverifiable, or outside policy windows. I did it to keep our numbers clean. Robert knew. I told him. He told me to do what I had to. A gasp rippled through the lounge. Robert didn't look up. Vanessa turned to Carla. Can you confirm that? Carla's voice returned without hesitation. Confirmed. We've located those complaint records and audio files. Natalie's voice is on 2 of them. Robert's signature is on 4. Natalie sat down, shaking. I didn't know how to stop, I thought. If I didn't follow, I'd be next. Vanessa approached slowly, her tone measured. You weren't a follower. You were the one holding the torch while others burned. But today, I'm putting that fire out. Natalie didn't respond. She wept quietly into her hands. Vanessa turned back to the rest of the room. For those still standing in this lounge, staff, clients, officers, and guests, I want you to understand something. Ownership isn't just a legal document or a title. It's a responsibility. And my responsibility is to make sure this never happens again. Not here. Not on my watch. Carla's voice followed once more. Steady. Corporate has initiated full disciplinary review and operational audit for the branch. Vanessa, the floor is yours to lead reform. Vanessa looked around the room. At Calvin, Maya, Zara, Keith, the clients who had rallied, the strangers who had stayed silent but now looked changed. Then let's begin. Because this bank no longer answers to people like Lisa. It answers to the people it was built to serve. And with those words, the door to reform didn't just open. It stayed open. wide enough for the future to walk through with dignity. Vanessa didn't wait for the applause to fade. The moment the firings were done and Natalie's confession still echoed in the air, she turned to the stunned room and said, "This isn't just about what they did, it's about what we're going to do now." She walked to the center of the private lounge, standing beside a cream leather chair that had once symbolized prestige. But today, it was just a seat among many. "Effective immediately, all branch operations are paused," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "No new transactions, no account actions, no client meetings until we reset what this institution stands for." The clients didn't groan. They nodded. Some even clapped. "We are launching the Summit Equity Program today, not next quarter, and we're doing it right here in this room. This branch will be the first test site for verbal audits, active diversity accountability, and a face-to-face values pledge for every single staff member who wants to stay employed." Carla's voice came through on speaker now, projected from Vanessa's tablet. "I've drafted the documentation. Internal ethics officers will arrive within the hour. Corporate has signed off." Maya raised her hand, voice cracking with hope. "What's a verbal audit?" Vanessa turned to her gently. "It means we don't just check numbers. We track words. What's said, what's omitted, and who's treated like a burden just for walking through the door." Calvin nodded. "That changes everything," Keith whispered. "That makes it human." Vanessa smiled faintly. "That's the point." Just then, in the silence that followed, a sound broke through that no one expected. Tyler Moss, the fired security lead, clearing his throat. Everyone turned. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "I need to say something," he said, hands loose at his sides. "I didn't just fail to stop what happened. I helped plan it." The air shifted. Vanessa's expression sharpened, but she didn't speak. Tyler continued. "Natalie came to me 2 months ago. She said corporate was sniffing around for non-compliance, and that Lisa had a plan to bury the red flags. My job was to make sure anyone who complained got quietly removed from the space before it turned into paperwork." The room was dead quiet. She said, "The less we see, the less we write." So I followed it. I flagged certain clients as elevated risk based on how they looked, how they asked questions, whether they challenged fees. Maya's face darkened. "That's profiling." Tyler nodded. "It was. I knew it. I did it anyway." He looked at Vanessa. "You gave me a job. I turned it into a shield for the wrong people." Vanessa stepped forward slowly. "Did Robert know?" "He knew enough to never ask questions," Tyler said. "And he knew which clients to avoid." Carla's voice came in again, calm but firm. "Vanessa, we've located 3 compliance reports that were altered after escalation. Tyler's name is on all of them." Tyler didn't argue. "I deserve to be held accountable, but I didn't come clean to save myself. I came clean because watching you stand in this room and say what you said, I realized I've never worked for someone I respected before." Vanessa didn't soften. "You nearly got me arrested. You intimidated people who came here in good faith. And now you want grace?" Tyler shook his head. "I want consequence, and I'll take it. But I also want you to know. There's more. Natalie wasn't acting alone. There's a list, a private tag in the CRM system, used to mark problem clients. And that list? It's longer than you think," Carla replied instantly. "I'll pull it now. We'll freeze access and start a forensic review." Vanessa turned to the room. "This is why we reform, not tomorrow, not at a retreat. Right here, in this space, where silence let bias grow. Today, we root it out." Clients began to clap, not because they were relieved, but because they were ready. Maya stepped beside Vanessa. "Let us help." Vanessa nodded. We'll do it together. Starting with truth. And the room, once poisoned by silence, began to transform, with voices raised, with truths confessed, and with a culture finally cracked wide open for light to enter. Vanessa stood tall as the last echoes of applause faded, not in triumph, but in clarity. She scanned the private lounge, no longer just a waiting area, but now the front line of transformation. The fired employees had been escorted to a holding room. Clients lingered not out of curiosity, but solidarity. Summit compliance officers had arrived and were already reviewing flagged reports. One officer handed Vanessa a short printed document. "These are the provisional action items approved by the board," he said. She read it silently, then nodded. "We begin here." Her voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of permanence. She turned to the room. "Effective immediately. Summit Wealth will mandate verbal conduct audits at all high net worth branches. No more hiding bias behind silence. Every branch will follow our example. Starting today, in Miami..." Carla's voice followed swiftly from the tablet speaker. "Corporate has also terminated Edward Pierce's accounts and initiated a formal review of his investment firm for internal bias violations." Vanessa looked toward the now vacant seat where Edward had once stood, sneering with false power. "He had influence," she said quietly, "but not character." Maya Reed stepped closer, her voice strong. "So what now? What happens after today?" Vanessa turned to her. "We build something that doesn't just react to injustice, but prevents it. That's the legacy I want to leave." Keith, still stunned by everything that had unfolded, added, "You did more than fire a team. You exposed a mindset." Vanessa gave a faint, tired smile. "Then we keep exposing it, until it can't grow in the dark anymore." Just as she turned back toward the compliance team, a voice rose from the back of the lounge, older, raspier, uncertain. "There's one more thing." Heads turned. It was an elderly white man in a pressed gray suit, his Summit Wealth client badge clipped to his lapel. "My name's Richard Langford," he said slowly. "I retired from banking 10 years ago. I used to oversee training for this region." His voice shook. "I trained Lisa and Robert and even Natalie when she was fresh. And I'll admit something I've never said publicly. We taught them to prioritize appearance, not openly, not with words like race or class, but with terms like client quality, suitability, and preferred posture. We never told them to reject women like you, but we gave them a system where rejection happened anyway." The room froze. Richard stepped forward. "I've watched today with shame, and I want to be on record saying, this started long before Lisa. I helped build the bias, and I want to help tear it down." Vanessa walked toward him. "Why now?" she asked gently. He swallowed. "Because watching you dismantle it with nothing but your voice made me realize I had mine the whole time and never used it." She paused. "Then use it now." He turned toward the compliance officers. "I'd like to give a full deposition and assist with training reform." One officer nodded and escorted him aside. The moment hung heavy, but honest. Carla's voice came through again. "Vanessa, I finished the review of that client flag list Tyler mentioned. 17 individuals marked as potential security risk had no prior incidents. 15 of them were Black or Hispanic. It's being submitted now for internal audit and external review." Vanessa took a deep breath, eyes briefly closing. "Then it's official. This wasn't a case. It was a culture." Maya reached out and touched Vanessa's shoulder. "And you didn't just fight it. You broke it wide open." Zara, standing quietly with her phone pressed to her chest, added, "I came here to start a business, and somehow, you gave me a future too." Vanessa turned to her and smiled. You still will. And this time, you'll do it in a bank that actually sees you. She looked around one last time, at the walls that had once contained prejudice, at the faces that now carried understanding, and then she spoke to all of them, to the cameraless world watching beyond that lounge. Let this be the last time silence walks away stronger than truth. Let this be the moment we remember that justice doesn't come from hashtags. It comes from who we choose to be when no one's filming. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my hand. I stood still and spoke clearly. If I can do that here, then so can you. Wherever you are. And as she turned to lead the compliance officers into the branch's inner offices, Carla's final words echoed through the speaker. Summit Wealth will never be the same. And that's exactly the point. The door closed softly behind them, but the message, the lesson, and the legacy stayed right there in the lounge, where silence was finally broken for good. If you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or denied, let this story remind you, your voice matters. Justice begins with truth. Subscribe, share, and stand with us, because the next story we tell might be yours.